Okay, everybody, here is a demonstration of how to create various types of drum tracks. This first one being how to use this very special type of track only in Logic called a drummer track. Okay, so I have a project here. I've already opened it with a software instrument, but I'm going to click the plus button above the track setting. This is where I can choose then, just like when it starts up, what type of instrument do I want. Of course, most of the time in this class we'll use software instruments. External MIDI is if I have an actual hardware synthesizer that I want to control via MIDI from my computer. Audio, of course, if I'm recording actual audio with a microphone or I'm importing in audio. Guitar or bass as if I'm actually plugging in a real guitar, a real bass, and plugging it into my interface to record that audio. And then notice on the very far right corner is one called drummer. So it's a very special type of track that they added to Logic a couple versions back. It's very cool. So if your details is closed, you can open that up. You can from here, you can choose like what type of drummer genre you want to use, but you can also change that later, so it doesn't really matter. You can have the library opened or not. For that, you can also open that later. Now, what a drummer track actually is, why it's kind of unique, is it is a kind of a hybrid between an audio and a MIDI instrument. They essentially took some real drummers and they recorded some drums and they kind of created sort of like MIDI patterns for them that you can alter. But the benefit here is it really is kind of like you've hired a drummer and they're going to play drum patterns based on what the music is, both the genre but also what's going on within the actual piece. In other words, is it a verse, is it a chorus, is it a bridge, and the pattern would alter a bit there like a real drummer would do. Okay, so I've got it selected. I'm going to click create. And there it goes. And what it does by default is it'll create an 8-bar phrase just by default based on whatever I chose as far as my genre and that type of stuff. So you can keep it or you can get rid of it. I'm going to get rid of this first MIDI track that I don't need first of all. So click on that, hit delete. So I've got this particular track. You notice that it's yellow. That's a drummer track, is by default yellow. And if I play that, okay, not that big a deal. I guess it was kind of nice at the very end here, at near the final bit of this phrase, the drummer added a little fill into the next bar, ready to go on. But that's not why drummer tracks are really pretty amazing. It's that you can kind of customize them. Even though there's these presets, you can customize them just about any way that you want. Just like if you told a drummer, hey, why don't you leave out the hi-hat? Well, you can do that easily. So first of all, before we get into this, let's talk about how you can change the drummer, you can change the genre, all that type of stuff. So if I go to library, which is the upper left corner in case you had it turned off, you see that I've got then my genres over on the far left, so I can do alternative, songwriter, R&B, electronic, hip-hop, percussion. We'll just leave it on rock for now, but then there's all these different drummers: Kyle, Logan, Anders, Max, Jesse, Ian. Let's put it on Jesse. It says, inspired by hard rock bands. Gives a little bio in case you care. But after that, then down in the bottom in this kind of editor area, which if that doesn't show, you can click the scissor tool. But I do have presets that I can choose on whatever region is selected up above. So maybe I like this broken glass. Then you go to the right, you can see an XY controller where I can make the pattern more simple, I can make it more complex, I can make it louder, I can make it softer, and obviously anywhere in between. So let's put it right kind of a little bit on the simple side and listen to it. Okay, let's hear a complex version of that. Okay, so you can hear how Jesse, the drummer, made it a little more complex with the kick and the snare and various stuff. I could also make it louder. kind of a medium complexity. So you can see how I was changing those things live while it's playing. It just takes a moment for it to readjust. But that's no different than if you're in the studio and you're kind of working through something. You're like, no, wait, play it soft here to get a little more simple. You're telling the drummer right then how to make those changes. It's pretty cool. But then I can go further to the right, and I can actually turn on or off certain parts of the drum set. So if I don't want a kick for some reason, I don't want a snare, I want to add tambourine, I want to add a shaker, a maraca, or hand claps, I can turn those things on. Notice I can only choose one of those percussion things. But I can turn them on. Do I want cymbals? Do I want any of this type of stuff? We'll go and put tambourine on there and see what that sounds like. It's in there, but it's a little soft. There's also, in this case, 3 different tambourine patterns I can choose. A little more active with that. So I can make some customizations there. I can also say how complicated the fills want to be at the end of a phrase. So here's what it is right now with that setting. Well, let's put it on about 50%. Fairly complicated, but let's see if we crank that up, what that sounds like. Okay, maybe I want just a more subtle fill. Yeah, it was definitely more subtle. I can also add swing to this. And by the way, whether I want 8th note or 16th note, let's make it 8th note. So it really changes the feel if you put that swing, and depending on the amount that you increase that. Okay, so pretty cool, and you can see kind of the advantages of what you can do with that. If I want to add another one, if I just move my mouse to the right of that, you'll see a plus button, and I can click that plus button, and then I could change that to be a completely different preset if I want, or I could take the same one, could actually delete that and say, I like this one, but I want it to be slightly different on this. I'm going to make that simple. So it's based on the same pattern, but suddenly gets a lot simpler. Okay, so whatever you'd want to do. One other thing that's also cool is that if you start shortening these, let's say I want just a 4-bar phrase. So I go to the bottom corner. I don't go to the top where I can loop. I'm going to go to the bottom, and I'm going to drag this back to be only 4 bars. Well, it didn't just shorten it like a regular drum loop would do from the loop browser. It actually modifies this as if I told a drummer, make that a 4-bar phrase, because now that fill is going to be after 4 bars, not 8. Okay, so it's very cool. One last thing that we will get into later is that if I'm using markers, I'm using arrange markers. This is really neat. I just clicked a few. I've got intro, verse, and chorus. And if I'm using one of these drummer tracks, I can actually click on these, click again to add one, click on them to add one. And notice how these are labeled intro, verse, chorus to match my arrangement marker, but the patterns will sound more intro-like, more verse-like, more chorus-like, because a real drummer would know how those should sound. So just give you a little taste of this. And then we skip ahead to going into our chorus, which usually has more activity. So very cool. You didn't even have to tell it that. It just kind of knew, just like a real drummer would know how to do that. So that's just an introduction of how to use a drummer track. They're super simple, super powerful. It's really a pretty amazing thing if you want that to sound like a real drummer is putting all these subtle changes in it instead of just a loop that repeats over and over again. So check that out.